Hey guys, Jason here again with Steamus Vape Supply, along with Colin, one of our sales associates, and we're going to be talking about pre-built coils. So if you've been looking into getting into RDAs, or maybe you have one and you just want something a little simpler, we're going to be talking about how to choose the right one for what you have and how to actually install them so that you're ready to go. So Colin, why don't you tell us a little bit about how would we go about selecting a pre-built coil for whatever device or RDA that they might have?
So obviously you definitely want to take into consideration the size of your post that you're using on the RDA. Make sure that you can fit whatever coils you're trying to use into the posts. You also want to keep into consideration the batteries you're using. What style of battery, whether it be an 18650, a 2700, or a 26650, list goes on. But you definitely want to take all that into consideration. Do your research first before you start getting into devices of these sorts. You just definitely want to make sure you have the knowledge in order to make sure you're doing this safe and properly. Well, you'd first want to take into consideration what type of heat that you would want, kind of flavor.
I like a hotter vape. I'm not so concerned about flavor. Clouds are a big deal.
Got you. So you definitely want to reduce, you definitely want to go down in the resistance to give you that definite heat. Going for a style like maybe if you're not going for flavor, maybe a Clapton would definitely help you out in the form of giving you a good cloud and good hit.
So if you want to go ahead and start setting these up, and we've got a close-up camera here set up so we can see exactly what you're doing.
Gotcha.
So just kind of go through your process.
So definitely, when it comes to a style like this, where it has the bearings and the grub screws, you definitely want to make sure that you have one lead for a coil underneath that little ball bearing, and then one above. Push that in, and then you're going to go ahead and take your second coil and do the opposite. So whatever lead is above the bearing on the opposite coil, you put the lead underneath, and then same vice versa. If I can get that in here, just 1 second. It really hates me. Oh my lord.
And that happens
There we
sometimes.
go.
All right.
Okay, so I've got my coils kind of lined up in there. I'm going to want to screw down my posts in order to secure the coils in there.
So you're getting them kind of as close to the post as possible without touching to start with, and then tightening down those screws.
And then I'm going to be pulling them away from the center post when I go to adjust after cutting the leads.
Okay.
Need to get some new juice, that's it.
Okay. If you end up having to move the coil around in order to cut the leads, it's not a big deal. You can adjust it back to centered and at the right height after.
And how close are you wanting to cut those leads?
You're wanting to cut them as close as you can possibly get to the post to avoid any sort of hot spot areas that could potentially mess up the coil or the hit in the process of using it.
Right, and then you're not going to want the leads to be touching the other wire on the other side, right?
No, you
Right.
don't.
That I like. We have a strawberry watermelon taffy. We have a blue raspberry, and
And be careful that nobody's standing around too close to get hit in the eye. So explain what you're doing here.
So right now I'm pulling the coil away from the center post because you don't want to have make contact with that. You want it to be separate and pulled away. So after I pull it, after tightening down the grub screws, I can then tweak with the coil and mess with it without having to worry about pulling it out of its position. And then you definitely want to make sure you have your coils at a parallel height. You don't want one to be way above the other or one to be way too far below, and you want to keep it above the edge of your juice well. So.
That makes sense. All right, now I'm going to start on this set that he gave me, and then we're going to start talking about cotton. What are we looking for when we're looking? Because obviously there's a lot of different brands out there, a lot of different options. What are we looking for when it comes to choosing the cotton that we want to put in our device, our RDA? Or
So usually when you're looking for cotton, the first thing you want to look for is obviously that it's unbleached natural cotton. But from there, it's kind of up to personal preference, the style of vaping you like, and decide the cotton you use. Personally, I use a cotton called Kendo. It seems to work out really well, holds juice really well. I don't have issues where I hot spot or have it give me dry hits constantly. It seems to hold up pretty well if you do end up hitting it dry to where you don't have to completely re-wick and redo your whole setup just because you hit it dry one time.
okay, so now I've got my coils in here, but they're obviously crooked. and I've had to spread them out a little bit to get them through here. You wouldn't obviously want to screw these down like this because they're going to be touching things. So how do we want to straighten up?
So actually, in this scenario, when you just try and push them as close as you can get them, and with them like this, you can actually screw the post down.
Oh, okay.
Because after the fact, we can just go and adjust those
Move
posts
them
right
afterwards.
back to be even.
Okay, so at this point we're good to go ahead and
Yep.
tighten them down.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah. And when it comes to coil styles of Claptons, Aliens, those sorts, the style that aren't just round wire, the ones that you just spin a wire around a, I guess a screwdriver or a coil jig in most cases, you don't exactly want to crush this wire. You want to make sure it's making a good connection and that it's
Right,
held
but
on
not
solid.
because I could keep
Yeah.
going
You can-
down on
you can
this,
keep
and it would
going
just
down, you
keep
can
turning
crushing
it, and right.
It'll get to the point where you'll end up severing the connection, and your coil could even fall off, or at a point melt and fall off, which can create issues in the
Right. So
future.
you kind of like, it's starting to get snug, and that's
Yeah.
probably a good once it starts to get snug.
Once you
spot
start to feel that it's starting to compress the coil down,
Right.
that's definitely when you want
That's
to
a good
stop because
stopping
you know
point.
it's making a good connection.
Okay. Now, how would we go about straightening these up? Or do we want to trim, I guess, the
You
leads
definitely want
first?
to cut the leads. So you actually have a pretty good setup on here, so you can just go in on each side
Right.
and cut that
Trim
little
all
lead
those
off.
guys off. All right.
I find it to be a little bit more tart and citrusy.
Watch your eyes. Oh, you got glasses on too, so you're good.
I'm safe.
Yeah.
Well, let's try this one. Do y'all sell the, can't think of that, well, the M3 coil, or for the Falcon?
I've got all the problems.
So, with yours, usually when you're trying to straighten coils up, it helps to take this screwdriver or something that you can fit inside that coil and just kind of
Right.
lift it and pull it, tugging it until you got it even
Right.
and straight. And you want both sides to look as close to the same as you can possibly get them.
Right.
With this specific style, so the Big Pro Mech, we like to keep it above the airflow. Gives for a nice.
Right. So the cotton is obviously going to then end up being right in line with the airflow, so it's going to be going through the coil about where you're inhaling, obviously.
So the next step, and this is one that I recommend everybody always do, make sure you check your ohms on your coils, no matter whether it be a pre-built that tells you what it is or not. Always check it on a regulated mod or an ohm reader first, before ever trying to fire it up on your mech tube. So
So we're going to make sure that we're in like safe territory, and that it's just at what we want it to be at.
precisely. And it does even help, personally, I like to tweak on the mod because I can adjust my wattage to make sure I'm not burning it too hot while trying to fix them and make sure they are firing evenly from the center out.
Makes sense.
It's just a safer way to do it to make sure you do it properly and you're not putting yourself or your devices at risk in this process.
And so if they don't have a regulated device, though, you can get just an ohm reader.
Yes.
When you just stick it on that, same principle.
Yeah, same principle. It'll
And those
do-
are fairly cheap. There's all kinds of options for those. You can spend a lot of money and get one that's fancy. We've got some here where you can hit the button and fire it even on the ohm reader, or you could just go with something that simply tells you the
And
ohms.
yours ohmed out at a 0.11, which is also a safe level for
Good
the
spot
battery
to be.
you're actually using.
Right. Okay.
So we both came out to that. So I guess the next step after this would be tweaking, trying to get them to heat from the inside out evenly on both coils. So I'm going to show you a bit about how that's done. Okay, so it helps to start on a lower wattage. Try not to start out too high. Usually for any coils, if it ohms out about where it did. So the 0.08, I would usually start out at about 80 while tweaking my coils, just to give it a safe level that I can slowly heat it up and not have to worry about it getting too hot too fast. So.
When you say looking for it to heat up from the
Inside,
the middle of the coil out to the outside of the
yes,
coil.
you want it to
right.
heat from the middle of the coil outward evenly, and you don't want it to take a super long time to ramp up. So in cases that, say like how mine is going, where the outside is heating up first and the inside is staying pretty cool until it catches up, it helps to scrape the coils, give it micro spaces, so that it can allow itself to all heat evenly without two coils touching too close and creating one massive hot spot in the center or the side of the coil. So it helps to just kind of scrape and push. So if you just push these together with ceramic tweezers, just to try and get it a more even spacing. You do want to try and keep that micro spacing just to keep it even burning all the way around. This this definitely is a good way to start out. I would usually recommend starting out if you were going to go into building, starting on a RDA on a regulated mod using pre-builts. Once you're comfortable enough tweaking with the pre-builts and you think you got it down, I would say you could probably be safe to move onwards towards making your own coils. And then from there, after doing more research, you could potentially move upwards towards a unregulated tube-style device, if that is to your liking.
So now we're going to check mine out. Same thing, put it on here. And the first thing we can do is, I guess, see where it, new coil, obviously, so that on there. And so right now, we are setting at 0.09.
So with this mod specifically, you actually have to remeasure.
Oh, okay.
So you're sitting in a
Oh,
0.10.
Yeah, that's actually pretty good. So now all we need to do is check and see if it's actually
Firing
firing well,
evenly.
which it probably won't be right at first. Nope.
Usually aren't.
Obviously no. So this one wasn't even hardly firing at all. A long time. So I'm quote unquote playing a noob slash basically am a noob. It's been oh yeah, I didn't even bring my, I should have brought it over. I had my Caravella back there I wanted to show off, but
Is it one that says missed?
it is.
Oh, did
I was
they
way off. And yeah. Does that look okay? Are we good, or we still got to do some work there?
Yeah, that looks okay.
All right. And then you want to be careful not to
Yeah, not to
go
touch,
too
you
far,
definitely-
and then don't leave it on because you'll end up popping the coil, and then you've done yourself
no good.
All right. All right. So now that we have this, we can start talking about wicking, not cottoning. How do we want to go about that? Obviously, there's some that's going to come in squares, and then you've got like over there, you've got some
Yes,
some
so
strips in that
and
one.
sometimes when you would buy a set of pre-built coils, it'll come with little strips of cotton like this that allow you to just re-wick without having to buy this whole sack of cotton. Instead, I decided to provide my own cotton today.
Little buy going on here.
Kendo cotton. So we just want to tear off a decent sized chunk, and from there we'll do some tearing to try and adjust it to the proper size. So usually I'll tear off a chunk like this and then tear it in half
Gotcha.
to make it thinner so it fits in my poles a lot better. And then even then, I could potentially just tear this in half and use these two pieces.
Okay, that makes sense. And then, so we got stuff like this. We also have the squares, in which
Mhm.
case you just use scissors,
Yeah,
right?
you would
cut yourself off the
you
strip
would use
that you
cotton
want.
shears
Right.
such as these
Ah,
to cut straight
cotton
down.
shears. That is fancy. Okay.
Mhm.
And then cut off the size you want, and then
Yep.
basically from there it's going to be the same process.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
okay. So walk us through this step then.
Okay, so when you start out with just your strip of cotton, you usually want to roll the end, make it thin so that it fits through that coil nicely. You can grab that end and pull it through once you have it, so I'll show you here.
And obviously you're going to want to make sure that you wait long enough for your coils to cool down before you go to put your cotton
Yes,
in,
of
'cause
course.
otherwise you'll burn yourself.
Okay, and you want to have it go to where it is snug, to where it's starting to resist, but it isn't pulling the whole coil out of whack.
Right.
And you don't want it too loose, because in that case you will have cotton split in the middle, and you'll be having to re-wig super often, which nobody wants.
All right. And I'm going to go snag one more type of cotton so we can see kind of the difference and get a A/B comparison.
Yeah.
We're out of threads.
So what I'm doing right now is actually fluffing the cotton. You want to just take your tweezers lightly and just pull off just a little bit of that extra bit on the cotton so you don't have too much, and create issues where it won't actually wig very well at all. You want it to be just thin enough but thick enough to work out. And with RDAs, you usually have a lot more leeway and freedom with how much cotton you're allowed to put. Whenever it gets down to RTAs, it's a lot more specific on the style of wicking and the amount of cotton you do use. Yeah.
So that's
So I
kind of
guess
when you got
to
a square just to kind of show the.
Yeah, so to kind of explain to you what I just explained, is when you have your cotton in here, you then want to just lightly take your tweezers and just pull off bit by bit a little bit of cotton, fluff it out so that it can absorb juice nicely.
Right. What are we shooting for in terms of how much cotton you actually have
Yeah.
sitting there?
So definitely when you're putting your cotton through, you do want it to sort of resist as you pull it through to where it's starting to like tug the coil, but it isn't going to completely mess your coil up. Just want it to kind of like flow through there nice and snug, but not too tight, not too like loose. Because in the case it's too loose, you just have the separation in the middle. Having to re-wig super often, once again, something nobody really wants to do.
You just missed me struggling with these cotton shears. That was pretty funny. Been one of those. Colin watched me try to put together one of our shipping boxes scenarios again.
Oh God.
All right. So while I do this, I guess not to hold things up too much. Why don't you talk about once you have your cotton in there, it's going to be important to go ahead and wet that cotton.
Yeah.
You don't want to just throw the cap on, throw a few drops in there, and try to go. You're going to have a very burned
So
experience.
once you have cotton laid out, you have it nice on there. You then just will lightly paint across the cotton with the juice. So just try and get every spot you can possibly see on that cotton wet. Make sure you hit across the top of the actual coil itself so it can soak through into the cotton in the middle. Yeah, so we just call this technique painting. You're painting your cotton.
That makes sense. It's a good way to look at it.
Make sure you color every single part of the cotton with that juice. So it's nice and wet, and then we'll be able to throw our battery in. So whenever you're putting a battery into a mech tube, make sure you always throw the positive end towards the vent hole. So on this one I have a little X vent hole here, so I want my positive end down. Just the safest way to do it. So, while he is in the middle of re-wicking, so once you juice up this cotton, super soaked, you just want to lightly pulse the button and blow. We call this act priming the coils. So what this does is already pre-soaks the cotton and allows you to get a nice refreshing hit off the start and not that dry, fresh cotton flavor that nobody's really a fan of.
What juice are we using? Since this isn't actually my RDA.
We're using key lime cookie.
Oh, all right. I haven't had this yet.
Yeah,
Sad boy. All right. God, it smells amazing.
it is.
Can't wait. So, starting off with the painting of the cotton.
Okay. And after I did all that, I just want to add a little bit more juice onto there, just so when I go to take that first hit, it's nice and flavorful.
Yeah, so it needs to be pretty juicy before you go to do that first hit then, right?
Absolutely.
All right, okay. But we don't want it, so let's go ahead and take the time. I mean, this is probably obvious, but explain what would be over juicing? How would you know that there's too much juice happening there?
Okay, so when you start to see the cotton is just all slick super down, there isn't any of the little fuzzy frays going on, it is just all super.
It's lost all of its fluffiness.
Pretty much. That's how you know that your cotton is way too soaked. And even in the case, if you look just the edge of your build or your juice well, if you notice that there's a pool of juice building up in there, you're probably adding a little bit too much juice and need to down a little bit. It's kind of, you have to kind of find the happy medium for dripping. So you have to kind of find, based on your build, your setup, how much you should be dripping after so many hits.
All right, so got it all juiced up, ready to go. So what's the next step there?
So, after this, it's pretty much down to just taking a hit, seeing how it's performing. You want to make sure that you have your airflow holes on your cap lined up with the sides of the coils, the wraps.
So
On
like
yours
that,
specifically, yours is fine because
Right.
you have a lock style cap. It's going to go in on exactly where
Right.
it should be. Whereas mine is a cap that can just spin on top of there, no big deal.
Right.
So I actually have to
Set it on there.
set
so
it
that
on there
it's-
where
right.
the coils are lined up.
Okay, that makes
Yours
sense.
specifically, you can just throw your cap on there. You don't have to worry about
Right,
where
it's going to already be lined up with the
Precisely.
coils. Right, all right.
So,
So I don't need to adjust this top in any, which I might. No, actually, it was good contact. That is actually really good.
It's a 600, by the way.
Ooh, I'm gonna feel that in a second. 6 mg on a drip. Nice. All right, so that's pretty much the process. So, feel free to go back and rewind if you need to watch that again. I know we kind of went a little quickly there, but I think that hits kind of all the points. So, just to do a brief review. So, your first thing you're going to do when picking out the coils is you're going to know what you're looking for out of the vape. Like,
Exactly.
what are you trying to get? Are you more flavor, more clouds, whatever? And then you're going to pick something that's going to be safe for whatever you're vaping
Yeah,
on. So you don't
whatever
want
style of device you decide to go with.
Right, don't go
whether
buy
it be
some
a squat-
.06 something on Facebook, and
Yeah.
so pick something that's appropriate for your device that gives you the type of feel you want, and then what's the probably the number one, if you were to just pick something, what's the number one mistake that people might make
when it comes to picking
when it comes
out
to
coils?
picking out a pre-built coil?
So there's some people that go the opposite route. It's not that it's a dangerous route, but they will find the biggest, fattest, thickest coils they can possibly find and throw them in there and expect them to perform better than any coil they've ever seen in their life. That isn't always the case. You definitely want to make sure you're paying attention to the type of wire, how many wraps are involved, what the ohm is going to be out to. You got to take all that into consideration. The size of the coil itself does not decide the performance
Right,
of
bigger's
the coil.
not better.
Bigger is not better in
Right.
every case.
Right, okay.
In most cases, if you're talking just standard round wire coils, yes, it does make it better. But you got to make sure you're staying safe. Even though you're going for that best coil you can possibly get, you want to make sure you're staying safe.
Right.
We even have people who go as far as where they have a device like that, and they will pick out a set of coils that are just not safe for that style device, just way too hot.
Right.
It can create a lot of issues both with the battery, the build deck itself, and can
Right.
even end up melting peak insulators.
Right, especially plastic or the Delrins and stuff like that.
So
that
you
gets
definitely want
too
to make
hot.
sure you're paying attention to your RDA in that form.
Right, sure.
Where is the Delrin? Where is the peak insulators, the plastic? Where is it? If it's in a place that is too close to the coil, you definitely want to go on the lower temp side.
Gotcha.
If you go too hot, you end up melting it and you risk destroying your device, doing harm
Right.
to yourself or anybody around you.
Right. And then we've talked a little bit about, I know we didn't necessarily show off the two batteries that we just put in here, and we haven't really talked about this, but a lot of people probably heard of Ohm's Law. And there's some Google images I've noticed the times that I've done it for some of our social media posts where it's
Yeah.
not even necessarily the right thing.
No.
People have just found numbers and called it Ohm's Law. But explain what Ohm's Law is if somebody wants to go. And again, you can Google this, and I would encourage you, if you find an actual vape site or somebody who has the real breakdown, you can have this saved or bookmarked. But kind of explain what that is and why people look at that.
So when it comes down to ohm law, that is paying attention to your ohms, your voltage, your amps, and your wattage. They all correlate with each other to find the safe level. You can find all sorts of calculators online that will do it all for you. All you have to do is be able to have at least two of the things. So in most cases, you're going to be able to find your ohms, and you're going to be able to find your voltage on your battery, or even your amperage in some cases. So just typing those in and just double checking, making sure everything fits within.
Right. And then the rest of the equation will process out
Yeah.
because they're all correlated. But that's something that people, especially if they're not going to have a vape shop help them out or something like that, should probably be aware of and at least have pulled up, because they can just make sure that they're safe at
Absolutely.
that point.
You can never be too safe in this situation. Going all those extra precautions just to make sure everything is good, it isn't going too far, it isn't too much work. It's the steps you have to take to make sure you're doing it properly, safely,
Right.
and can properly enjoy it without feeling at risk.
Right. And again, I think there's been some bad press out there where people have started saying that, RDAs are unsafe and things like that. And it's really not the case. It's just like anything else, using common sense and doing it right. And then when you start out, a good tip would be to go ahead and use a regulated device.
Absolutely.
Because then you're knocking out a bunch of those potential problem points right there. 'Cause
When you
this
start
is gonna
out,
be looking out
when you
for
start out on a regulated device, you obviously have the safety features that are implemented into the device itself. In the case that it is too hot, there's a low, overcharged load, something of those sorts. The mod will not let you actually fire it.
Right.
It's a good way to have guidelines to practice when it comes to rebuilding and messing with rebuildables.
Check yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so that's it. That's kind of our little pre-built walkthrough. So hope you guys enjoyed it, and we'll have some more videos coming out soon. So we'll see you guys next time, and have a good rest of your day.